Hey guys, this is John and I'm playing paluch666 in a 5+3 game on chess.com. So 3-second increment instead of 5. Okay, he opens with e4. Let's play e5, double king pawn. It is Sunday afternoon. I have my coffee in hand. I'm ready to go. So 5-3, got to play a little bit faster. Again, this is a fairly quick time control for improvement purposes, but I think you can still get a decent game in. So let's play d6 here. He's fianchettoing his light square bishop. That's unusual. I'm thinking about prodding with my h-pawn. I actually kind of like the idea of this when they've played g3, bishop g2, and the center is stable. So I'm okay with playing a flank pawn move here because white's not likely to break in the center with d4. I have multiple pieces defending that square. So this is an idea you can employ in many situations against a fianchetto. I especially like it because the destination, the logical destination for white's king is on the king side. So playing this is always going to give white a little bit of pause, I think, in castling over there. Okay, bishop e3. So far my opponent has developed pretty logically. I have invested 2 tempi on h5, h4. Now I have options with the tension. So a lot of you amateur players out there, you're often in a hurry to get rid of the tension. You either want to take the pawn or, in some cases, push the pawn. In many cases, push the pawn. But keeping the tension can be favorable. I am considering this or this. Also, bishop takes e3 and then take here. Looks kind of tempting. It's a forcing continuation. I can create a weakness in white's position, so I'm leaning towards doing that. h3, bishop here, I don't really see what I've gained. I mean, the bishop could be subject to attack, but I don't quite buy it. And again, it releases all the tension. The h-file becomes closed. So I think I'm going to take here. I actually think it would have been in Paluch's best interest to play something like h3 or maybe h4 before I got my pawn up here. But let's take. And if he takes with the h-pawn, I'll swap the rooks, and then I'm thinking about posting my queen on g5 and attacking e3. I'm a little bit behind in development with my minor pieces, so I need to take that into account. So I do have to watch out for stuff like knight coming into d5. He plays knight takes g3. Okay. So again, I could play this. There's this knight d5 move that's a bit pesky, though. So I'm just considering if that happens, what I'm going to do about it. I could play knight ge7 or knight f6, but that blocks my queen. So I think I'd rather attempt to move my queen and then bring my knight out. But again, I don't know if it's going to work timing-wise. Maybe I can play queen g5, and if knight here, play something like king d8. There's also rook takes h2 business. So, yeah, let's do this. White might just respond with some sort of move like queen e2 or queen d2. But yeah, there's this nice shot, rook takes h2, removing the defender of the knight. And if white just takes back, I can play queen takes g3 check and then take that rook on h2. And I'll have won a piece for a pawn in that transaction. So I think this is an important moment for white. I'm very curious to see what he'll do. Maybe queen f3 is decent, defending both e3 and g3. I like the fact that my opponent is pausing here. I think he recognizes that this is an important moment. Yeah, and queen f3, there you go. Okay, so rook takes h2 is not going to work anymore because the knight is defended. I have bishop g4 developing with tempo, but that's the type of move I kind of like keeping in reserve because it's going to keep my options open. Maybe just knight f6 or knight ge7. Both look decent. Kind of leaning towards knight f6. Let's play that. Yeah, so now if knight d5, I can swap it off. If knight b5, I would have to play king d8, but I think I'm actually okay with that because the center, again, is pretty closed. And if ever white castles queenside, I can skewer. So he does play knight d5. Now, do I take and then play my knight into b4, attacking c2, maybe encouraging white to castle so I can play this bishop g4 move? Taking seems by far the most normal thing to do. Knight b4, my knight gets a little overextended there. That makes me slightly nervous. Maybe just knight e7 is a better option. Yeah, because knight b4, king d2. So I'm going to take this, and I think I'm going to play knight e7. Looks like a bit more sound of square for this knight, because my knight would be undefended there. Yes, it does set up the threat of knight takes c2, but in general, you guys shouldn't be playing too many one-move attacks. If you can't point to another purpose for the move that you're playing, especially with knight moves into your opponent's half of the board very early in the game, I think you should use those pretty conservatively. Make sure the knight's stable. If white couldn't easily chase me away with his pawns, I would consider it a bit more closely. But I think king d2 would have been a good response there. So let's see what white does. The queen is bearing down on f7, so he might consider castling or rook f1, but I think I can pretty easily parry those moves. Maybe just f6 if white does that. He plays c4. Okay. Now I think I'm going to get ready to castle queenside. I think that's the destination for my king. Could play bishop g4 with tempo, but again, I really like the idea of keeping that move back. Another move I'm looking at here is knight g6, trying to go knight h4. That is intriguing as well. Maybe white will play knight e4 against that. Let's just play bishop d7. So yeah, getting ready to castle. I would lose sight of the f7 pawn there, but I don't think white can take that because my rook from d8 can come over to f8, and white's queen will be trapped. Okay, knight e4. Makes sense, hitting my queen. I'm looking at queen h4 check, or also queen h6. Queen h4 check seems pretty good. I'm thinking he'll probably block with the queen, but maybe then I can play knight f5 and try to force a favorable trade. Get my opponent to come to me with the trade. Queen takes h4, and I have a nice choice between knight takes h4 or more likely the move I'm going to play at that point is rook takes h4. Okay, so white moves his king. So no castling for white. F5 perhaps, but still this pawn is actually not hanging. So castles, if white takes it, rook d f8. If he takes here, I have rook g8, and that bishop is undefended on g2. So yeah, let's do this. Setting a little bit of a trap, because he might logically think that I had blundered this pawn. But this is the plan, and note that my knight on e7 is guarded by my queen, so he can't capture there. c5 is a move white could consider here. Trying to destabilize the situation around my king. Maybe I'll play bishop g4 against that move. d5 would be undefended, but I don't want to open up this diagonal too much. Still a very interesting position. Okay, h3, so guarding the g4 square. Yeah, my opponent is showing good recognition of my threats. So f5, might be time to play f5. I don't think getting a minor piece to my opponent's 5th rank, he's, like as I said, stopping bishop g4. I think it might be time to play this. Yeah, let's kick the knight out too. It's on a pretty good square on e4. I'm predicting he'll play knight c3 or knight g3. Don't think there's a whole lot of reasons to play knight f2 here, so the knight going to one of those squares makes sense. Probably knight c3. That would be my choice. Yeah, then his queen doesn't have to babysit that knight over there. Now, can I open up the position on the king side favorably? Seems kind of tough. Maybe g5, g4, but my queen is sitting on the h-file. I got to watch my time a little bit more now, too. f4, f4 looking to open his king, perhaps. f4, he might play e4, but I feel like that's a nice long-term situation for me, so I'm going to do that. And if he takes, probably take with the pawn, keep the queens on the board. Also just like to take some action on the king side or in the center. Try to distract white from attacking me on the queen side if white ever attempts to do that. This pawn on d5 should hinder white's attack down this diagonal. So he can lock it up here. He can take, yep, I'm going to take with a pawn. Try for this next. Good outpost square for my knight. Can get into g3 or d4. Also, my bishop is open again, so now I'm bearing down on h3, so maybe that'll prevent him from including his rook in the attack. Again, if I were white, I would look for dynamic options here. I would consider c5, idea being take pawn to d6, although I'm a little skeptical that that works for him. Okay, rook here. What about knight f5 now? So if he takes, I have knight g3, looking for a fork. That definitely appeals to me. Let's go with that. Again, setting a little trap. he's done a great job, as I've said, of recognizing the threat so far in this game. So I think he's going to be skeptical of the fact that I'm seemingly offering him this pawn for free. So he might play knight e2 to cover the g3 square, because I'm threatening knight g3 all the same. So knight e2 or knight e4. Okay, he plays queen there, but that just allows this move all the same. Yeah, and I'm hitting his queen with my bishop as well. Now when he takes, I could take here with check, but that rook is not running away anymore. So this is another tension type thing. I can just take here. Maybe he'll waste time moving one of these rooks and just let me take, and I've effectively gained an entire move. So don't be in a rush to release the tension, whether it's pawn tension or a situation like this where you know you're going to get one of your opponent's pieces. Commonly happens with the knight forking two rooks. I'm also defending this pawn in the process. Okay, knight e4. So now I have to take one of the rooks. Usually you want to take the rook in the corner. So leaning towards that, I could take this one and try to deflect. It's not a huge decision, I think. It's certainly not one that I should stress about too much with this little time on the clock. So I'm going to take the one in the corner, and then I'm going to double rooks and just hammer h3. He should probably play knight f2 to defend. Knight g5, his knight's a little less stable there. So if I play this move, for instance, I think I should be winning the h-pawn, because if he comes into the position, that knight might not have a route home. Just gets trapped. So yeah, and h4, I can take it. So I think knight f2 was the sturdier defense there. Probably would have played rook e8 to take the file. Yeah, looks like this is on the verge of being trapped. I guess he has bishop f3 maybe to distract me, but notice how these flight squares for the knight are all taken away. So bishop there. Okay, rook f5 I think is a clean way to win this piece. That doesn't allow his knight out. Could take the pawn on h3 as well, but he would swap and play knight g5. So now again, playing with an increment definitely helps. I mean, I know I take my time in these games often because I'm explaining moves in detail, but I would not be this nonchalant if there was no increment. No question about that. So let's go here. Going after h3. I'm going to play f3. Push the f-pawn. Even if I happen to lose the f-pawn, I think I'm okay with that. Let's do this. And let's play bishop f5. Just want to trade with him. That's usually your MO when you're up so much material. Trade with your opponent. Deprive them of resources to fight back. Here white's pinned on the h-file, so they just lost a piece. But the position was hopeless. Okay. Thank you to paluch666 for the game. Just tell him that in the chat. I think he played very reasonably. Yeah, he hung with me for quite a while. And just a few things on the opening. So he played this Vienna game, knight c3. I think this is slightly less strong than knight f3, but it is a legitimate move. Knight f3 develops and hits the pawn on e5, so it kind of gains a tempo, whereas knight c3 is just more or less a developing move, but it controls key squares like d5. So I just played knight c6 and g3. I do know that this setup is possible, but yeah, I think this h5, h4 stab is a good way to try to cause white some problems. And I mentioned that he should probably play h3 or h4 just to put a stop to my h-pawn advance. It's double-edged, though, because if h4, he kind of gives away control of g4. I might put my bishop there, or maybe even knight f6, knight g4 in the future. h3 is probably the correct way to deal with this idea. h3, idea h4 to go g4 and lock up the king side. I would have the f4 square in that case, but white may actually be able to play f4 in the future. Yeah, because the way he played it, it felt like I definitely profited from the h-pawn advance and then the trade here, creating a weakness on h2. But, you know, at this level, 1600s, this is where you do start to expect your opponents to see your threats, and they don't tend to make one move gross blunders, run blunders of pieces and stuff like that. And he pretty much avoided that until later in the game when time pressure was becoming a factor. So, yeah, I do give him credit for seeing stuff like, you know, here, queen f3, defending this, and he avoided the major threat, which was rook takes h2, removing the defense of the knight and trying to win further material. I wonder if knight d5 or knight b5 would have been the way to go here. Actually, sorry, I guess if he's going to move the knight d5 to defend e3, which I'm threatening to take with check, and attack c7. No, I'm sorry. That runs into rook takes h2, I think. There may be some issues with the knight taking on c7 and then going to a8. But, yeah, queen f3 was all right. Okay, here, yeah. So maybe in this case, if he's going to move the knight, maybe he should play knight b5 to try to force me to inconvenience my king. So I will take a look at that in the analysis, knight b5, and I might have just played king d8. Maybe bishop g4. Yeah, bishop g4 also looks pretty good as well. So that if knight takes c7, I could play king d7. Again, I'll take a peek at this in the analysis. So I felt pretty comfortable here. I'll see what the computer thinks about knight b4. You know, I was kind of dissuading you guys from playing those type of moves, but it may be okay there. Again, I thought king d2 was a good solution for him. I think he played a little bit too passive right around here. You know, moves like h3. I do think black's a bit better in this position, but I would have been a bit more concerned had he started attacking me. He never got any sort of initiative going against my king. It always felt like he was responding on the king side, and I think in a situation like this, that's probably the wrong approach, because white's just chronically weak on the king side with that permanent weakness here. My structure's perfect. So I think he would have been better off keeping his head down and trying to push over there, or maybe bringing one rook to the defense of the king side. Like, he could play rook a to f1 here, but I don't think he should play h3. It kind of just sticks out as a weakness, and I'm not sure the pawn's even better on h3 than it is on h2. Yeah, because after this, it seemed like one-way traffic, and he needed to play, I think, knight e2 in this position, or knight e4. One of those two moves to cover the g3 square. And had he played, let's say, knight e2, I was going to play g5 to defend that pawn on f4, and maybe start playing down the e file, try to get my rook involved. I see that e3 square is pretty tender, so I can think about knight e3 in various situations. But I do feel like once it gets this far, that black is clearly better, maybe close to winning. I mean, definitely when I fork on g3, I should be winning. So I think if I were to offer an improvement for white, it would be right around here, and kind of goes to show you that a lot of times when you're just chronically weak on one area of the board, you actually shouldn't play on that board too much. You may be forced to if your opponent is creating huge threats, but I think practically speaking, especially in a blitz game, white would be better off trying to attack my king, playing a move like c5, trying to open this diagonal. Okay, let's click into the analysis board and see if there's anything we can glean from the engine analysis. Yeah, so h5. You can do this in many forms against the fianchetto. In the Sicilian Dragon, for instance, on the white side, the open Sicilian, playing for h4, h5 is a common attacking plan, and castling queenside. So because I played this move, it's less likely I'm going to castle over here, but that's all right because the queen side is open for me to castle. Yeah, I'm just curious what the engine thinks. I was saying h3 is probably what white should do. h3 and h4 are both there right at the top. So yeah, I think putting a stop to black's advancing makes sense. I like this move. Again, intending to meet h3 with g4. Keep things on lockdown over there. Yeah, now he played bishop e3. Knight traded. This bishop e3 trade for a bishop on c5 is fine in many cases, but when I'm able to take and make a pawn weakness on this side of the board, I like it a lot less for white. Sometimes you might do this to open a rook that you have on f1 if you're white. If you're already castled on the king side, that's one thing. But here I think the weaknesses just add up pretty quickly. The engine likes bishop g4 here as well. Yeah, queen g5 looks good. Queen f3. King d2 is another suggestion. Yep, but queen f3, knight f6. Okay, and I'm curious what the computer says about knight b5 here. Maybe bishop g4 is just a good solution to this move. Attacking this. Yeah, bishop g4, queen f2. Yeah, and just castle. Because note that if white takes on c7 check, tempting at first, but I'm going to close in on the knight, and white has two attacked pieces to worry about here. So that's a big problem. White has to attend to the higher value threat, and then I'm going to take the knight on the next move. So yeah, knight b5. I guess it's just kind of a worse position for white here. Not lost, but I think clearly worse. So knight d5, we trade, knight e7. Okay, what does the engine think about knight b4? And once more, bishop g4 is given, but as I said during the game, I kind of like keeping threats like that in reserve, so giving white a chance to go wrong. Castling seems like such a logical move. I'm sure a lot of players would make that move because they feel like they want to get their king to safety. It seems like the right thing to do, but then we set up that skewer. So think about that. If you can contribute to your position, play a useful move, and keep a major threat in reserve, often good to do so. So kind of a mini theme for this game is keeping the tension, keeping the threats, holding off on playing that tempting move. Okay, so knight b4. Again, hoping for castles and then bishop g4, although I could even take this pawn with check, but bishop g4 would be stronger. But it's a bit of hope chess. I think by and large, you shouldn't have that word in your chess vocabulary, hope, as hardcore as that sounds. But when you start playing hope chess and you're creating one-move threats, you're probably leaving opportunities on the table and playing superficially. So yeah, king d2 I think is just a good response to this, and I'd have to justify my knight position out here. You can see now the advantage swings over to white according to the engine. So knight e7, yeah, c4. c4 might have been a slight mistake as well. He does reinforce d5, but maybe it's not the most constructive move because d5 is defended a couple times. Even if the queen moves, the bishop would still be defending d5. The engine likes h4 here, very strange. Take, and then king d2, pawn sacrifice, maybe hoping to take and play rook h1 coming up. Turn the tables on the king side on me, perhaps. It's interesting, trying to use that strength, or that weakness as a strength. I just played bishop d7 here. Yeah, knight g6 is another strong suggestion. Bishop d7 looks good, though. Knight e4, I gave a check. Yeah, and if white had played queen g3, I was mentioning this knight f5 move I really like. Not even one of the top moves the computer suggests. Queen h6 is what the engine likes here, looking for knight f5 in this form. Attack both of these weaknesses, but even here, knight f5, make white initiate the trade, take. This feels like an extremely comfortable endgame for black to me. This is a threat. I might play king e7 now because the queens are off the board. I might keep the king in the center, play my other rook over to h8, and just hammer that weakness. Very nice position to play for black. Again, I still have to watch out for queenside stuff, but that's how I'd consider playing it. Yeah, and I was criticizing this h3 move. I realize black is clearly better at this point, more than +1 according to the computer, but h3 I think didn't do white any favors. I mean, I bet the computer is going to say my suggestion here of c5 isn't all that good tactically, but I think this sort of mentality at least is helpful. White has to create some sort of distraction and generate some counterplay of their own because things are not going well on this side of the board. Yeah, the engine thinks it's a downright bad move. And again, I don't know. I'm going to kind of couch this in uncertain terms. I don't know if c5 would be best here. Probably not. Yeah, and the engine wants to play f5, drive the knight away, and then maybe have the queen swing over. But at least, if white can time this somewhere, they might be able to get something going. Oh yeah, I guess I can also take, and if knight takes, that runs into... sorry guys, I keep dragging stuff from the side panel. That runs into queen b4 check with the fork here. That is an issue. Yeah, but f5 looks pretty good too. If takes, maybe d6. Again, just trying to get something going. Like, this would be the dream scenario if white could ever open up the queen towards this. Guess even here, somehow black is doing well. Queen takes b7, knight takes, king takes d6. So, strictly speaking, the computer wants to try to trade queens here. Queen g3 or queen f2. Yeah, those endgames, as I've already said, are pretty good for black. So, h3, f5, knight c3. I went ahead and played f4. Now, what would give white the best chance of holding out here? Off the top of my head, I kind of feel like it would be e4, but I see the computer doesn't like that so much. e4, just trying to keep things closed. Then it says I can play rook here, probably a prelude to doubling. Yeah, it feels like eventually that pawn is going to drop off. Maybe back off the queen at that point. Knight g6 ideas. Yeah. Unenviable choice here for white. He took, I took, rook here. Yep, knight f5. So not tending to the threat of queen takes f4, but trying to create a threat of my own with knight g3. Yeah, now it's mandatory to cover the g3 square, like knight e4 is what the computer suggests. Yeah, and then I would go g5. That's still a fight, though. This is a pretty sturdy knight on e4 for the moment. I definitely like the idea of jumping into e3 next. Here's the line the computer gives here. Knight e3, hit the rook, hit the bishop. Rook f to g1. Queen h6. Yeah, keep the queens on the board. Maybe I'd even post the queen here and try to attack on the queen side. Principle of two weaknesses style. Yeah, black's definitely in control, but still very much a fight. And queen g4 allowed this. And I took, keeping the tension for a move. Took the knight, or took the rook in the corner. And then just hammered this guy. And here was probably the last chance to put up some resistance, knight f2. Keeping the knight back and defending h3, because it's hard for me to drive this knight away. And I was thinking about playing rook e8 against that before white jumps on the e-file. But yeah, he can try to blockade a little bit. I'm going to have to slowly convert this position, maybe g5, g4 someday. Still probably try to go after this pawn, maybe bring my king over. Winning for black, but going to take some work. Yeah, and then I attack the knight, and he should probably move the knight away, but that's going to allow bishop takes h3 with a further collapse from white. I have 3 attackers on that pawn. He only has 2 defenders after the knight moves. So he did get the knight trapped here, and it was soon over. Trades favor black a lot, so that's why I went for bishop f5. Okay, so again, not a bad game at all by paluch666. Thank you for the game. Not a huge fan of this setup for white, but I do think if white faces this sort of thing in the future, or if you play this setup, you might want to consider h3 to try to meet h4 with g4. But interesting game. I think, again, a big theme for this game was tension. Pawn tension, holding off on playing the obvious move. Even later in the game when I got that fork, not taking one of the rooks right away. See if you can profit from keeping your strong, obvious threats back for a move. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back again soon with another one. Bye, guys.